Sergeant Douglas Bogue was hiding in a crack between the rocks. From above, he could hear screaming. Then came the smell of burning human flesh. 150 of his comrades had been forced into trenches, doused with aviation fuel, set on fire. Those who broke free, with burning bodies, with charred skin, were cut down by Japanese machine gun fire. The guards were laughing, and that evening, they threw a celebration dinner to commemorate their successful operation. Daniel Crowley should have been there, in those pits, but he'd been transferred just months before the massacre. Instead of death by fire, he got hell on a hell ship, 11 days in a cargo hold, standing knee-deep in human waste. Then slavery in the copper mines. 3.5 years. 3.5 years he survived on hatred. "I survived by an indomitable burning anger and passionate hate," he would say later. This is the story of a man who turned his rage into armor and lived to be 98 years old. If this story moved you as much as it moved me, subscribe to the channel. Here I tell stories about people who went through the unimaginable and survived, about events that get silenced, about truths that must be remembered. One subscription is your vote to make sure stories like this are never forgotten. December 14, 1944, 1400, Puerto Princesa, Palawan, Philippines. The tropical sun beats down on Camp 10A with merciless intensity. 150 American prisoners of war stand in formation, their skeletal frames barely casting shadows on the dusty ground. They have no idea that in less than 2 hours, 139 of them will be dead, their bodies charred beyond recognition, their screams echoing across Puerto Princesa Bay. This is their story. Every name is real. Every date is documented. Every horror is verified by sworn testimony, military records, and the accounts of the 11 men who somehow survived. Daniel Crowley, a soldier from Connecticut who had worked on this very airfield for 18 brutal months, had been shipped back to Manila just months earlier. He would later describe the camp's conditions in stark terms that still haunt the historical record. "You worked or you were beaten. If you objected, you were beaten to death." The men who remained behind on December 14, 1944, were about to discover that Crowley's words understated the horror that awaited them. March 1941, Nichols Field, Philippines. Daniel Crowley arrives at his first duty station, a young soldier from Greenwich, Connecticut, who enlisted in the Army Air Corps at 18 years old. The Philippines in 1941 represents paradise to American servicemen. Tropical breezes, azure waters, and the comfortable life of peacetime military service, far from the troubles of Europe. Crowley had joined the military with simple aspirations. As he would later recall in interviews, he wanted to take a long trip somewhere at the expense of our country and come out as soon as I could. The irony of these words would become apparent within months. The young soldier settles into the routine of aircraft maintenance at Nichols Field, near Manila. The base buzzes with activity but lacks urgency. War seems distant, a European concern, something happening on the other side of the world. December 7, 1941. The date that changes everything. Pearl Harbor burns. Japanese aircraft streak across the Hawaiian sky, and America's Pacific Fleet lies crippled in its anchorage. The declaration of war follows within hours. December 8, 1941. The Philippines awakens to a new reality. Japanese bombers appear over Nichols Field. Crowley, untrained in combat arms, nonetheless takes action. With other soldiers, he participates in an improvised air defense, welding together antiquated British machine guns to create more effective weapons. It is a desperate measure, but desperation has become the order of the day. The Japanese raid proves devastating. Hangars collapse into twisted metal. Aircraft burn on the runway. Infrastructure crumbles under the precision bombing. Nichols Field, once a symbol of American power projection in the Pacific, becomes a graveyard of military ambition. They destroyed all the hangars, most of the aircraft, and other infrastructure, military records document. The Philippines campaign has begun, and America is losing. Late December, 1941. The tactical situation deteriorates rapidly. Japanese forces under Lieutenant General Masaharu Homa land at Lingayen Gulf and advance toward Manila. General Douglas MacArthur orders a strategic withdrawal. Crowley and his fellow soldiers sail to the Bataan Peninsula in the dark of night. These are not naval personnel or trained amphibious warriors. They are airmen without aircraft, mechanics without machines, support personnel thrust into the role of infantry. On Bataan, Crowley joins the Provisional Air Corps Infantry Regiment. The men dig in for what will become a legendary last stand. January 1942. The Battle of Bataan begins in earnest. The fighting is brutal. Crowley and his unit participate in the Battle of the Points, repelling 3 Japanese amphibious landings on the west coast of Bataan. The conditions grow increasingly desperate. Supplies dwindle. Rations are cut and cut again. Malaria sweeps through the ranks. Men grow weaker, even as the fighting intensifies. Imagine the courage and determination it required for Dan to stay alive, yet remain engaged in these assaults. Undersecretary of the Navy Gregory Slavonic would later observe at Crowley's recognition ceremony decades after the war. The fighting rages for 3.5 months. The outcome, however, becomes inevitable. Japanese forces continue to pressure the exhausted defenders, and the situation grows untenable. April 9, 1942. Bataan falls. General Edward King makes the difficult decision to surrender. Over 70,000 American and Filipino soldiers, the largest American army ever to surrender, lay down their arms. The infamous Bataan Death March begins, a forced march of over 60 miles that will claim between 5,000 and 11,000 lives. But Crowley will not march. The moment of surrender approaches. Japanese forces close in on the remaining American positions. Most soldiers face a terrible choice: surrender and face the uncertain mercy of their captors, or die fighting. Crowley chooses a third option. As his commanding officers prepare to surrender their men to prevent what the Japanese had threatened, massacre, Crowley and several other soldiers and sailors make their decision. They refuse to become prisoners without attempting escape. The breakwater near the shore offers hiding places among the rocks. As darkness falls, Crowley and his companions slip into the water. 3 miles of ocean separate them from Corregidor, the island fortress still holding out against the Japanese onslaught. The water is shark-infested. The channel is mined. The distance seems impossible for men already weakened by months of combat and deprivation. Crowley swims. He clings to lifeboats and debris from the various ships that have been bombed or scuttled. His arms burn, his legs cramp. The salt water stings his cracked lips, but he keeps swimming. After what seems like an eternity, he reaches Corregidor. He is met by the 4th Marines Regimental Reserves. The fortress island still flies the American flag. For now. Corregidor represents the last American stronghold in the Philippines. The island's network of tunnels and formidable defensive armaments make it a natural fortress. From here, American forces can deny the Japanese the use of Manila Bay. But the island is also a prison. Japanese artillery bombardment begins immediately after the fall of Bataan on April 9th. From the heights of Bataan, Japanese guns pour fire onto the island. The bombing is relentless. From 29 December 1941 until 6 January 1942, the Japanese airplanes bombed the island, destroying half of the wooden structures on the island, the electric train system, and the water distribution system, military records document. Everyone is put on half rations. With 15,000 people on the island, there is food for only 6 to 8 weeks. Crowley fights alongside the Marines in desperate shore defense operations. The Japanese launch assault after assault. Each is repelled, but the cost grows higher. May 5th through 6th, 1942. The final assault. Japanese forces land on Corregidor. The defenders fight with everything they have, but they are outnumbered, outgunned, and exhausted. At 10 o'clock on May 6th, Japanese tanks land on Corregidor. General Jonathan Wainwright, who has assumed command from MacArthur, faces an impossible situation. It was the terror that is vested in a tank that was the deciding factor, Wainwright later wrote. At 10:30, Wainwright orders the broadcast of a surrender message. Corregidor falls. Crowley is now a prisoner of war. The surrender of Corregidor marks the beginning of a new nightmare. The prisoners are initially kept on Corregidor, where they are forced to perform grim tasks, collecting the dead Japanese for cremation and burying the dead Americans and Filipinos. On May 23rd, the Japanese prisoners on Corregidor are marched to the South Mine Wharf. They board 3 ships anchored in San Jose Bay. After landing in Manila, the Americans are paraded down Dewey Boulevard to Old Balabid Prison. From there, Crowley is sent to Cabanatuan, one of the largest POW camps in the Philippines. The conditions are horrific. Men die daily from malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, and disease. There is no medicine. The guards are brutal. But in August 1942, Crowley sees what appears to be an opportunity. "Want men, the guards shout. 300 go to Manila." Crowley volunteers. Like many POWs, he imagines that anywhere must be better than Cabanatuan. He will soon learn how wrong this assumption is. August 12, 1942. 300 American prisoners arrive at Palawan, the westernmost island in the Philippine archipelago, 350 miles from Manila. They are shipped to Puerto Princesa and marched to an old, dilapidated Filipino constabulary barracks. This will be Camp 10A. Their mission? Build an airfield for their Japanese captors. The nightmare of Palawan begins. The prisoners pass through the stone entranceway, along a dirt road lined with a dozen coconut trees to a courtyard in front of a U-shaped barracks building. The compound consists of old Filipino constabulary buildings, and conditions are immediately apparent. This is a place of suffering. They are met by Captain Nagayoshi Kojima, commander of the 131st Airfield Battalion. The prisoners nickname him the Weasel. Kojima stands on a small pedestal so he can look down on the assembled men. His voice is squeaky, his manner imperious. "Americans!" He pauses for effect. "Today we build roads." It is a lie. They are to build an airstrip. The area is nothing but thick jungle. The task seems impossible. But the Japanese have a simple solution to the problem of impossibility: brutality. Lieutenant Sho Yoshiwara commands the garrison company. Lieutenant Ryoji Ozawa handles supply. Master Sergeant Taichi Deguchi leads the Kempeitai, the Japanese military police, feared throughout the occupied territories for their brutal tactics. Army Captain Fred Bruni serves as the senior American officer among the prisoners. Dr. Carl Mango, an Army Medical Corps officer, and Dr. Henry Knight, a dentist, are also among the prison population. They will do what they can for their fellow prisoners, but their resources are non-existent. The work begins almost immediately. The prisoners start their labor with only primitive tools. They fell trees, clear land, level an area of 2,400 by 225 yards. They haul coral and crush it by hand into gravel. They pour concrete. They work 7 days a week. They have no shoes. They wear only loincloths. Their bodies are already weakened from months of captivity. The task before them is staggering. Build a 3,000-yard-long airstrip using only hand tools, wheelbarrows, and 2 small cement mixers. The runway itself must be 1,530 by 75 yards, with an 8-inch thick concrete surface. Additionally, they must build revetments for 150 Japanese planes. The sun beats down relentlessly. Temperatures soar. The humidity is crushing. The prisoners labor under conditions that would challenge healthy men with proper equipment and adequate nutrition. They have none of these advantages. It was all hand labor, one survivor would later recall, with only a level mess kit of rice and an occasional bowl of mango bean soup to keep us going. The rice is wormy Cambodian rice. The soup is made from komodo vines boiled in water, sweet potato leaves that provide minimal nutrition. Food becomes an obsession. The prisoners dream of home cooking. They mentally construct elaborate menus they will eat upon liberation. In the meantime, they eat whatever they can scrounge: lizards, birds, monkeys, snakes. But the real horror is not the lack of food. It is what happens when they fail to work fast enough for their captors. The Japanese guards carry what the prisoners call swagger sticks, short clubs a bit thicker than an officer's woven leather stick. The guards were expert at applying it to the kidneys or the back of the head, one survivor recalled. They could drop a man with one blow. Daniel Crowley summarized the conditions with brutal clarity. You worked or you were beaten. If you objected, you were beaten to death. This is not hyperbole. Men are beaten for the slightest infractions, real or imagined. One guard catches 2 prisoners taking green papayas from a tree in the compound. His punishment is swift and brutal. He breaks their left arms with an iron bar. When 6 American POWs are caught stealing food in December 1942, the punishment is even more severe. They are tied to coconut trees in the courtyard and beaten in front of the other prisoners. One man is whipped with a wire which tears his flesh to the bone. When one guard tires, another takes his place. After the public beating, the men are forced to stand at attention while a guard beats them unconscious. They are revived and beaten again. Finally, they are dragged to a cell and put on a ration of half a mess kit of rice every 3 days. The guards make no distinction between major and minor offenses. Every transgression, real or perceived, is met with violence. One prisoner recalls dozing off at work. A guard spots him immediately and strikes him on the head, dropping him to his knees. Foolishly, the prisoner gets up, looks the guard in the eyes, and says, "You didn't hurt me, you SOB." The guard hits him again. He goes down. He gets up once more, yelling, "You still didn't hurt me." Other prisoners watch in horror, knowing the guard could easily kill him for insubordination. But this time, something strange happens. The Japanese soldier shakes his head and says, "Ya baka, you're crazy," and walks away. Others are not so fortunate. Despite the brutal supervision and threat of dire punishment, some prisoners attempt to escape. The jungle offers hope of refuge with Filipino guerrillas who operate throughout the province. The first escape attempt occurs on August 11, 1942, just days after the prisoners' arrival. 6 men make the attempt. 5 succeed in joining the Filipino guerrillas at Brooks Point in South Palawan. The second attempt, on August 29, 1942, involves 2 prisoners. With the aid of friendly Filipino guides, they also succeed. But the third attempt in February 1943 fails. The fourth attempt, on June 28, 1943, also fails. The consequences for failed escapes are severe. 2 POWs who make it through the wire manage to elude capture for 6 days before being dragged back to camp. They are severely beaten before the assembled prisoners until they lose consciousness. Then they are loaded on a truck and taken away. Filipinos later report that they are shot and buried in unmarked graves. The message is clear. Escape means death. Failure to work means death. Objection means death. The only option is to endure. There is one American doctor in the camp, but the Japanese provide him no medicine. He must rely on his own remedies, improvising treatments with whatever materials he can find. The prisoners suffer from a catalog of tropical diseases: malaria, scurvy, pellagra, beriberi, tropical ulcers. They also suffer injuries from their labor and from the physical mistreatment of their guards. When Red Cross supplies finally arrive in January 1944, hope briefly flickers. But the Japanese have removed all the medicines and drugs from the parcels for their own use. One Marine, Private First Class Glenn McDole of Des Moines, Iowa, requires emergency surgery. On March 14, 1943, McDole is breaking rock when he suddenly breaks out in a cold sweat. He grabs his side and falls to his knees. A guard immediately starts beating him, ordering him back to work. The American doctor convinces the guard that McDole is seriously ill. He examines the patient and delivers a grim diagnosis: acute appendicitis. Without immediate surgery, McDole will die. But there is no anesthetic. McDole's response demonstrates the courage that will later save his life. "If I'm going to die, let's die trying." He is held down on a table by 5 guards, who make fun of his screams as the doctor operates. The surgery takes 2 hours and 50 minutes. Infection sets in. McDole hovers near death. One night, his abdomen ruptures, spewing pus and blood. The doctor tries sewing the wound shut, but the thread will not hold in the mutilated skin. In desperation, the doctor takes shirt buttons, lines them up alongside the incision, and sews through them. The improvised closure holds. After weeks of recovery, McDole returns to work. By September 1944, the airfield work has progressed sufficiently that the Japanese decide they no longer need all 300 prisoners. They order 159 POWs to return to Manila, retaining 150 on Palawan to complete the remaining work. Daniel Crowley is among those transferred. He does not know it, but this decision will save his life. Crowley is shipped to Manila, then in March 1944 placed aboard the Taikoku Maru for transport to Japan. He is about to experience the horror of the Hell Ships. The Hell Ships are requisitioned merchant vessels that the Japanese Navy overloads with POWs being relocated to the Japanese home islands or elsewhere in the empire. Crowley would later describe the nightmare. They would prod you in the ass with their bayonets and force you down into the deepest dragoons until they packed human beings so tightly that you couldn't turn around, sit down, lie down. You just sat in the feces. It's beyond your worst nightmare. The guard's idea of a humane gesture, he recalls, is to let a few men each day carry buckets of feces and urine to the top deck and dump it over the side.
Men die in the holds. The heat is unbearable. There is almost no water. The air is foul with the stench of human waste and death.
After 11 days of this torture, the Taikoku Maru arrives in Japan on April 3, 1944. Crowley is taken to Tokyo POW Camp 8B, a Hitachi copper mine. Later, he is transferred to Tokyo POW Camp 9B at Ashio, a 400-year-old copper mine owned by the Furukawa Company. "We were slaves at the Furukawa copper mine," Crowley would recall. Each morning, about 25 men are packed into an iron bucket with a cable attached to the top. They are dropped 2,000 feet into the earth. "They had fun every morning bouncing us up and down," Crowley remembered. "We were positive that that cable that was attached to the top would snap any minute, any day." The mine conditions are terrifying. The timbers are rotting. The overhead is very low. Pebbles and small stones fall constantly. Water runs through the tunnels. Outside the mine, prisoners walk through waist-deep snow to reach the wooden hut where they are housed. The Japanese provide 2 or 3 fist-sized clumps of charcoal to heat the entire structure, where hundreds of prisoners are packed together. Crowley survives through sheer will. "I survived," he would later say, "by an indomitable burning anger and passionate hate, and good luck." Meanwhile, back on Palawan, 150 of his former fellow prisoners remain, unaware of the fate that awaits them. October 1944. The strategic situation in the Pacific changes dramatically. General Douglas MacArthur fulfills his famous promise, "I shall return." On October 20th, Allied forces land on the island of Leyte. The campaign to liberate the Philippines begins in earnest. American air attacks step up to support the campaign. B-24 Liberators appear over Palawan. October 19th, 1944. A single B-24 Liberator attacks Puerto Princesa, sinking 3 small intercoastal ships and damaging several aircraft. October 28, 1944. More Liberators return. They destroy as many as 60 Japanese aircraft on the ground. For the POWs at Camp 10A, the sight of American aircraft brings hope. They believe liberation is imminent, but their optimism is tempered by fear. The prisoners have heard rumors that the guards are under orders to kill all POWs if the Americans invade the island. They do not know how accurate these rumors are. The truth is far worse than they imagine. The Japanese High Command has anticipated this situation. In May 1944, a written order was sent to each Japanese branch camp commander. The order, which would later be introduced as evidence at war crimes trials, is explicit. During an attack on a branch camp by the Allies, the main force shall keep strict guard over POWs, and if there is any fear that the POWs would be retaken due to the tide of battle turning against us, decisive measures must be taken without returning a single POW. The meaning is unmistakable. Kill all prisoners rather than allow them to be rescued. The directive elaborates on methods, whether they are destroyed individually or in groups, or however it is done, with mass bombing, poisonous smoke, poisons, drowning, decapitation, or what, dispose of them as the situation dictates. The order concludes with a chilling instruction to annihilate them all, and not to leave any traces. General Douglas MacArthur becomes aware of the Japanese intentions. In November, he sends a warning to Field Marshal Count Hisaichi Taruchi, Japanese commander-in-chief in the Philippines. MacArthur informs his counterpart that he will be held responsible for the abuse of POWs, civilian internees, and non-combatants. He reminds Taruchi that these groups must be accorded the dignity, honor, and protection provided by the rules and customs of war. MacArthur relays that he has been furnished unimpeachable evidence of the degradation and brutality to which American POWs have been subjected, in violation of the most sacred code of military honor. On November 25th, the Allies drop leaflets throughout the Philippines, ensuring the message reaches both commanders and subordinates. The warnings are ignored. As American air attacks increase, the Japanese order the POWs to construct air raid shelters within the camp compound. The prisoners dig trenches 5 feet deep and 4 feet wide. They roof them with logs, palm fronds, and dirt. 3 large shelters are constructed. Shelter A holds 50 men, Shelter B holds 35, and Shelter C holds 25 to 30. Several smaller 2- and 3-man shelters are also built. Each shelter has only one entrance, small enough to admit only 1 man at a time. This is Japanese regulation. The prisoners are told to enter the shelters when air raid sirens sound. But the men in Shelter C have added something the Japanese do not know about. They have dug the shelter to extend beyond the barbed wire fence, with only a 6-inch plug of earth concealing an emergency exit. They understand that these shelters might become their graves. The hidden exit is their insurance policy. They do not know how soon they will need it. Lieutenant General Seiichi Terada, commanding general of the Japanese 2nd Air Division headquartered in the Philippines, receives intelligence reports. He believes an Allied convoy is approaching. On the evening of December 13th, he radios instructions to the 131st Airfield Battalion at Palawan. Captain Nagayoshi Kojima, battalion commander, receives the message. He summons his subordinates. Due to an imminent Allied invasion, he tells them, The 150 American POWs are to be annihilated. Each soldier is issued 30 rounds of ammunition. The order has been given. The countdown to massacre begins. December 14, 1944, 200. The Japanese guards at Camp 10A roused the POWs far earlier than normal. Something feels different. The prisoners notice additional guards in the camp, but most shrug it off as a response to the recent air raids. The POWs are marched to the airfield to fill bomb craters. They work through the morning hours, crushing coral, pouring gravel, repairing the damage from American air attacks. Marine Corporal Rufus W. Smith turns to his longtime friend, Corporal Glenn W. McDole. "Something is going on, Dole. What the hell do you think is happening?" McDole has no answer, but the feeling of dread is unmistakable. They notice more guards than usual around the worksite. The guards seem tense, nervous. They watch the prisoners more closely than normal. About 11, the Japanese soldiers signal the POWs to stop working. The Americans are marshaled to one side of the runway. Lieutenant Yoshikazu Sato, the man the prisoners call the Buzzard, appears. He stands before the assembled men. "Americans," he announces, "your working days are over." The prisoners interpret this statement as good news. Most believe the invasion is coming. They will soon be free. They could not be more wrong. Following Sato's announcement, guards herd the men into waiting trucks. They are driven back to Camp 10A. A little while after the trucks reach the camp, the air raid siren sounds. An old church bell clangs its warning. 2 American P-38 Lightnings have been sighted. The planes are at high altitude and moving away. The POWs do not take them seriously. The alarm sounds again, a third time. Lieutenant Sato screams, "They're coming! Planes! Hundreds of planes!" The men are quickly herded into the 3 air raid bunkers.
The guards' urgency is unusual, their manner aggressive. They club any prisoner who hesitates. Navy signalman C.C. Smith refuses to enter the shelter. Lieutenant Sato draws his saber and splits the man's head in 2. The message is clear: comply or die. The prisoners crowd into the shelters. Shelter A fills with 50 men, Shelter B with 35, Shelter C with nearly 30. The 4 American officers, including Captain Fred Bruni and Dr. Carl Mango, are directed into a smaller shelter. In previous raids, the Americans stayed in the shelters until the all clear was given. But today is different. This time, Lieutenant Sato orders the POWs to stay in the shelters. Guards angrily strike any prisoner who tries to look out, clubbing them with rifles or prodding them with bayonets or swords. Marine Sergeant Douglas W. Bogue notices the difference immediately. "This was the first time that they ever forced us under cover," he would later testify. "In previous air raids, they never bothered about us." Time passes. The men wait in the dark, cramped shelters. No sounds of aircraft, no explosions, just the tropical heat and the growing sense of dread. For more than an hour they are kept underground. Then comes the horror. Lieutenant Sho Yoshiwara orders his company into formation. "Fix bayonets and load 5 rounds, he commands. Superior Private Tomisaburo Sawa fixes the bayonet on his Type 99 Arisaka rifle. He carefully checks to make sure the weapon is loaded. Captain Kojima appears. "It was necessary to kill all the POWs, he announces. Yoshiwara personally directs the placement of individuals. He issues objectives and methods. He orders those with rifles and machine guns to kill any POW who comes out of the air raid shelters. At the entrance to Shelter C, Glenn McDole peers out to see what is happening. He observes several guards carrying buckets of liquid. Others carry lighted torches. He watches, uncomprehending, as they approach Shelter A, where the American officers are confined. 5 Japanese soldiers approach the first shelter. They throw buckets of high-octane aviation fuel into the entrance. 2 others throw lighted torches. There is a muffled whoomp and a burst of flame. Then the screaming begins. The tightly packed shelter becomes an inferno instantaneously. The prisoners inside have no chance. The aviation fuel ignites with explosive force. Men are burned alive in seconds. Dr. Carl Mango, the Army Medical Corps officer, runs forward from the shelter, his clothes burning. He pleads with the Japanese to stop. He is machine-gunned down. Other prisoners, their bodies engulfed in flames, try to escape. They claw their way through the entrance, screaming in agony. A machine gun opens up. Guards fire their rifles into the shelter. The dead and wounded block the escape of others, trapping them in the flames. Lieutenant Yoshiwara yells, "Shoot them! Shoot them!" The light machine gun on the veranda goes into action, cutting down the burning men. Superior Private Sawa fires his rifle. "I believe I dropped 3 of them," he would later testify at the war crimes trial. Hand grenades are thrown into the shelter. The screams continue. Within seconds, the Japanese guards move to the second large shelter. The process is repeated with mechanical efficiency. Soldiers pour gasoline into the entrance. Torches follow. The shelter explodes into flames. Agonizing screams fill the air. Men inside the shelter panic. They push toward the entrance, but the opening is small. Bodies pile up. The living climb over the dying. Guards fire their rifles into the entrance. Machine gun fire sweeps the area. More grenades. The screaming continues, then begins to fade as the men inside succumb to the flames and smoke. The stench of burning flesh fills the air. In Shelter C, Sergeant Rufus Smith sees what is happening. "They're murdering the men in A Company pit," he screams. "Finish digging the tunnel." The prisoners in Shelter C had prepared for this possibility. Their hidden exit extends beyond the barbed wire. The men begin clawing frantically at the dirt plug that conceals their escape route. Glenn McDole takes another quick look from the entrance. What he sees will haunt him for the rest of his life. Men engulfed in flames. Guards bayoneting the wounded. Machine guns firing. The sounds of dying men. My God, he thinks. The Japanese are going to kill us all. One American, his body burning, tears a rifle from a Japanese soldier and shoots him before being bayoneted to death. Others fight hand-to-hand with their tormentors, even as flames consume their bodies. Superior Private Sawa watches as 7 or 8 POWs came running out of one of the shelters. Lieutenant Yoshiwara screams, "Shoot them! Shoot them!" The machine gun opens up. All of them fall. The men in Shelter C dig frantically. Outside, the Japanese prepare to set their shelter ablaze. Suddenly, the earth gives way. The emergency exit is open. One by one, the prisoners pull themselves through the opening. They tumble down the 60-foot cliff to the beach below. About 30 to 40 Americans manage to escape from the last shelter before the Japanese ignited. But they are not safe. The Japanese quickly realize that some prisoners have escaped. They send soldiers to pursue. The POWs scatter among the rocks on the beach. Some attempt to swim across Puerto Princesa Bay immediately. They are shot in the water. Others hide in the rocks, in the jungle, anywhere they can find concealment. Sergeant Douglas Bogue finds a small crack among the rocks. "I remained there, all the time hearing the butchery going on above," he would later testify. The stench of burning flesh was strong. The search intensifies. The Japanese soldiers hunt the escaping prisoners with sadistic pleasure. POWs found among the rocks are killed cruelly. Some are shot, others are bayoneted in the stomach and left to slowly die. Wounded men are buried alive or set on fire, while guards laugh and cheer. Those who try to swim are shot in the water. The soldiers use dynamite to force men from their hiding places, only to murder them when they emerge. Marine Corporal Elmo Mo Deal is burned, shot twice, and bayoneted about 20 times in the course of his escape. Somehow, he survives.
Marine Sergeant Willie Smith escapes his shelter and crawls back up the cliff. He hides under a bunch of overlapping grass and weeds. Below his position, 4 men hide in the rocks. Japanese soldiers find them and kill them. Then the soldiers line up and bayonet the grass every few feet, looking for more survivors. One of them stepped on me, Smith later recalled. But the bayonet missed me, so, again, I got by okay. Glenn McDole spots the camp's garbage dump and dives into the rotting mass. The smell is overpowering, but he pushes deeper until he is completely covered. He ignores the worms and maggots and forces himself to remain still. 2 other escapees burrow into the same mound. Muffled shots penetrate the garbage pile. One of the buried men panics, jumps up, and runs for the water. He is immediately shot down. Another stands up and shouts, "All right, here I am, and don't miss me, you SOBs." A volley of shots ends his life. McDole remains still. The search pauses. The Japanese soldiers hear the call for dinner. They return to camp. That evening, officers of the Palawan garrison and members of the Kempe Tai hold a celebration to commemorate the events of the day. They eat while the bodies of their victims still smolder in the trenches. Lieutenant Sato orders his men to dump the stray bodies into the trenches. They splash aviation fuel over the remains and set them alight once more. To make it appear as if the shelters had sustained direct hits from an American air attack, they throw sticks of dynamite and grenades into the trenches. The smoke from the fires can be seen across Puerto Princesa Bay. Filipino guerrillas soon learn that the Japanese claim to have killed 149 of their 150 POWs that afternoon. The diary entry of a Japanese sergeant major for December 15 documents the aftermath with chilling simplicity. Due to the sudden change of situation, the 150 prisoners of war were executed. Although they had been POWs, they truly died a pitiful death. But the Japanese count is wrong. 11 men survive. As darkness falls, the survivors begin their escapes. Those who can move make for the water. Puerto Princesa Bay stretches before them, 5 miles to safety. They are naked, exhausted, weak from years of captivity and the trauma of the day. Their bodies bear the wounds of their escape: burns, bullet holes, bayonet gashes. Army Private First Class Eugene Nielsen has been shot twice and is badly cut up. He enters the water anyway. Marine Sergeant Rufus Smith, already bitten by a shark on his arm and shoulder during his swim, manages to get loose from him. He runs into an old fish trap and rests briefly, avoiding a Japanese patrol boat, then continues his swim across the bay. 2 Japanese patrol boats roam the bay, shooting at anybody and anything that moved. The survivors swim in darkness. Their only guide, the distant lights of the Iwahig penal colony on the far shore. The current in the bay is strong. Some have to swim farther than the direct 5-mile distance. Glenn McDole remains hidden in the garbage dump. He cannot move yet. The Japanese may return. Radio man First Class Joseph Barta wanders into the jungle. He will spend 10 days hiding and evading Japanese patrols before being safeguarded by guerrillas. Albert Pacheco and Edwin Petrie hide in a cave. The crabs eat at their flesh. "The crabs ate on us pretty good down there," Petrie would later report. When the high tide forces them out, they too swim the bay. Filipino guerrillas of the Palawan Special Battalion have been monitoring the situation. They hear about the massacre almost immediately. The smoke has been visible for miles. Filipino civilians report what they have seen. The guerrilla organization on Palawan has grown significantly since its formation in 1942. By late 1944, under the command of Major Pablo P. Moico, the Palawan Special Battalion consists of 57 officers and 1,058 enlisted men. Their missions include intelligence gathering and armed resistance. They have operatives throughout the province.
When the first survivors reach the far shore, the guerrillas are ready. Eugene Nielsen stumbles through the swamp and encounters a Filipino wielding a bolo knife. Nielsen tells him, "I think I am the only one alive from the Palawan prison camp." The man replies, "You have friends here." He leads Nielsen to a jungle hideout. When Nielsen arrives, he discovers that the guerrillas have already found Pacheco and Petrie. Over the next few days, they locate more Americans. Glenn McDole remains hidden in the garbage dump until morning. At one point, he is almost discovered. A guard comes close enough to touch him, but another escapee is discovered nearby, and the guard runs off. McDole seizes the opportunity. He flees the dump and takes refuge in a sewer outlet, where he finds a badly wounded prisoner. The two try to swim across the bay, but the man is too weak. McDole stays with him until he dies from his wounds. On the evening of December 18, 3 days after the massacre, McDole slips into the water and begins the 5-mile swim. He is in the water all night. His arms and legs grow numb, almost useless. Just before dawn, he collapses on the beach. He finds a coconut, cracks it open, and drinks the milk. As daylight emerges, he sees huts across a smaller bay. He decides to swim to them, praying they represent a friendly village. Halfway across, just before his strength gives out, he spots a wooden fishing trap. He climbs aboard and passes out. He awakens the next morning to the smell of food being cooked in the village. A native fishing boat approaches the trap. "Hey, Joe!" a Filipino calls out. "You a POW?" McDole responds weakly, "I was, but no longer." The guerrillas infiltrate the American survivors southward to Brooks Point, about 25 miles away. They travel on foot and by outrigger canoe. McDole is reunited with Sergeant Bogue. After resting 1 day, they are forced to flee. Word arrives that a Japanese patrol is headed their way. On Christmas Eve, 1944, the two Marines are on a hill overlooking a Filipino village. The sun is setting. Their escorts stop. In almost perfect English, they begin to sing, "God Bless America." McDole and Bogue break down in tears. One of the Filipinos says, "My friends, you are now in the free Philippines." The Palawan Special Battalion sends a flash message to the 6th Military District Headquarters. The report describes the massacre. On the afternoon of 15th December 44, shortly after the morning raid by 2 American planes at Puerto Princesa, all the American PW were shoved inside a barbed wire enclosure by 50 Japanese soldiers under 1 officer. Shortly thereafter, several Japanese soldiers entered the enclosure with several cans of gasoline and started pouring gasoline on the prisoners. After they were all soaked with gasoline, they started to burn them. Many of the prisoners tried to fight their way out and fought stubbornly. Others tried to escape through the barbed wire, but the Jap soldiers with their pieces, sabers, and daggers started shooting, stabbing, and clubbing those who tried to escape. And those who were fighting for their way out, battling for their life, those whose clothes caught fire, had just a moment of furious struggling before they succumbed. Those who were shooting, stabbed, and clubbed to death were burned, just like the rest who never had the strength anymore to struggle from the infernal grave. Until this date, only 5 American prisoners of war are known to have escaped this terrible Holocaust. The report reaches General Douglas MacArthur's headquarters in early January 1945. The impact is immediate. Major General Charles A. Willoughby, MacArthur's Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, immediately dispatches aircraft to recover the survivors. On January 6, 1945, a U.S. Navy PBY Catalina flying boat with a fighter escort links up with the guerrillas at Brooks Point. They pick up 6 Americans who escaped from the POW camp. Also on the manifest is an American who has remained in the Philippines since 1898, whose son-in-law leads the local guerrilla unit. The PBY flies the 7 Americans 850 miles over Japanese-held territory to Morotai, an island south of the Philippines in the Dutch East Indies.
Glenn McDole is evacuated from the Philippines on January 21, 1945. In time, 5 other Americans are safely recovered by Filipino guerrilla forces. 11 survivors, 139 dead. The Palawan massacre has immediate consequences. Senior commanders are horrified. They recognize the imminent threat to other POWs and detainees throughout the Philippines. With several thousand American and Allied lives at stake, the rescue of POWs and internees becomes a high priority. 4 raids are launched in short succession. January 30, 1945, the raid at Cabanatuan. Army Rangers, Alamo Scouts, and Filipino guerrillas rescue over 500 POWs.
February 3, 1945, the raid at Santo Tomas internment camp. February 4, 1945, the raid of Balabid prison. February 23, 1945, the raid at Los Baños. Over 7,000 POWs and detainees are freed in less than a month. Private First Class Eugene Nielsen's testimony is credited with convincing the U.S. military to embark on this campaign. The 11 survivors of the Palawan massacre have saved thousands of lives. February 28, 1945. The 8th Army lands on Palawan as part of Operation Victor III. Many of the perpetrators of the massacre are killed in action or go missing during the campaign. Lieutenant Yoshikazu Buzzard Sato, who carried out the massacre, is believed killed. His body is never found. Captain Nagayoshi Kojima, the Weasel, is missing in action. Lieutenant Sho Yoshiwara is also missing. None of them surrender. In Japan, Daniel Crowley continues his slave labor in the copper mines. August 6, 1945. The United States detonates a nuclear weapon over Hiroshima. August 9, 1945.
Another weapon is detonated over Nagasaki.
September 2, 1945. Japan signs documents of surrender aboard the USS Missouri. 2 days later, Crowley is liberated. He has been a prisoner for 3.5 years. In early 1945, American military personnel excavate the burned and destroyed dugouts at Camp 10A. The Army Mortuary Unit reports 79 individual burials and many more partial burials. The skeletons show evidence of violence: bullet holes, skulls crushed by blunt instruments. Most of the remains are found huddled together at a spot farthest away from the entranceway, showing the men had desperately tried to escape the fire. In 2 dugouts, remains are found in a prone position, arms extended, with small, conical holes at their fingertips. The men had been trying to dig their way to freedom. In 1952, the remains of 123 victims are interred at Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery near St. Louis, Missouri. They are buried together in a mass grave. After the war, survivors Glenn McDole and Douglas Bogue helped the U.S. War Crimes Branch identify former guards and officers detained in Sugamo Prison. They are interrogated in Tokyo's Daiichi Building. General Tomoyuki Yamashita is charged with the Palawan massacre and other war crimes under the doctrine of command responsibility. Under what becomes known as the Yamashita Standard, holding commanders responsible for subordinates' war crimes even when the commander does not directly order them, he is convicted. On February 23, 1946, Yamashita is hanged. On August 2, 1948, the Palawan massacre trial begins in Yokohama, Japan. Of the 33 charged with war crimes, only 16 are put on trial. It proves impossible to find most of the Palawan garrison. 6 are acquitted. Those found guilty on November 8, 1948 include Lieutenant General Seiichi Terada, Commanding General of the 2nd Air Division, sentenced to life in prison. Master Sergeant Taichi Deguchi, Kempeitai Commander, sentenced to hang, later commuted to 30 years. Lieutenant General Kizo Mikama, sentenced to 12 years. Lieutenant Colonel Mamoru Fushimi, sentenced to 10 years. Superior Private Tomisaburo Sawa, sentenced to 5 years. Head Cook Manichi Nishitani, sentenced to 5 years. The remaining 4 received sentences of 2 to 5 years. Superior Private Sawa appears at the trial somewhat the worse for wear. Sergeant Bogue admits to beating him severely. Despite Bogue's request to have Sawa hanged, he receives only 5 years. On December 31, 1958, all those remaining in prison are freed under a general amnesty for Japanese war crimes prisoners. The 11 survivors of the Palawan massacre return to America. They carry their memories with them. Glenn McDole becomes an Iowa highway patrolman for 29 years, and later, a Polk County sheriff. He is called up for the Korean War and serves 1 year at Camp Pendleton, California.
After retirement, he shares his story at schools, church meetings, and community organizations.
2 or 3 nights a week, he says in a 1973 interview, I wake up in cold horror of it. Those nightmares only increase with age. It's up to almost every night now, he reports decades later. His memoir, Last Man Out, is published in 2004. He dies in 2009. Eugene Mielson is interviewed by Jeffrey Panos on behalf of the University of Utah in 2006. Rufus Smith gives testimony that helps document the massacre for history. Douglas Bogue testifies at the war crimes trials and helps ensure some measure of justice. Each survivor carries the weight of what they witnessed, and the question that can never be answered: why them? Why did they survive when 139 others died? Daniel Crowley returns to Connecticut after the war. He raises a family and becomes a successful salesman for Northwestern Mutual. But the war never leaves him.
I haven't carried any hate forward, he says when asked about his attitude toward his former captors, but the memories remain vivid.
2 or 3 nights a week, I wake up in cold horror of it, he says, echoing Glenn McDole's words. Crowley is officially promoted to sergeant in October 1945, but he never learns of the promotion. For 75 years, his service goes unrecognized. On January 4, 2021, at the age of 98, Daniel Crowley finally receives the ceremony he deserves. At Bradley Air National Guard Base in Windsor Locks, Connecticut, he is officially presented with the rank of sergeant, the Prisoner of War Medal, and the Combat Infantryman Badge. Governor Ned Lamont proclaims it Pacific War Heroes Day in his honor. Undersecretary of the Navy Gregory Slavonic presides. Grace under fire, calm under pressure. Easy words to use in the quietness of this auditorium, Slavonic observes. Historian Mindy Cotler-Smith calls Crowley a miracle of mental toughness and endurance.
Dan is truly representative of the American spirit and grit, she says.
Of the approximately 26,000 Americans held prisoner by Imperial Japan, nearly 11,000 died in POW camps as slave laborers and aboard hell ships. Of those who survived, a very high percentage came back completely lost, Smith notes. Crowley is one of the fortunate few who returned intact. I simply believe I was blessed by a strong father with the strong mind who imparted some of his genes to me so that I could make it, he says. For decades, the Palawan massacre is largely forgotten. The site at Plaza Cuartel in Puerto Princesa has only a small monument displaying the names of survivors. Don Schlote, a San Diego artist and veteran who was a prisoner at the camp before the massacre, makes it his mission to change that. Schlote had been an Army medic at Bataan before being imprisoned at Palawan early in the war. He tried to escape and was transferred to Balabid Prison in Manila before the massacre occurred.
The killings haunt him for decades.
He completes a series of 77 paintings that depict the slaughter in abstract, impressionistic, and realistic forms. Disappointed that the U.S. government never erects a memorial, he takes it upon himself.
In 2007, with the help of PSU President Teresita L. Salva, Mrs. Ellen M. Hagedorn, and City Mayor Edward S. Hagedorn, Schlote begins work on a permanent monument. In September 2009, the memorial is dedicated. The monument is a pyramid-shaped stone structure, about 6 feet high. 3 inscribed brass plates tell the story of what happened. Atop the monument sits a bronze sculpture created by Schlote. It depicts a tortured male figure writhing in pain as flames rise from his feet. The names of the men who died are inscribed for posterity. Schlote dies in 2010, having accomplished his life's mission. December 14, 1944, remains one of the most horrific atrocities committed against American prisoners of war. 139 men died that day in Puerto Princesa. They were Marines, soldiers, tankers, and airmen, captured months before when Bataan and Corregidor fell. With only hand tools and a wheelbarrow, they cleared the jungle and broke up coral to build an airfield for the Imperial Japanese Army. They endured years of disease, hunger, and emotional and physical abuse at the hands of their captors. And then, when liberation seemed imminent, they were burned alive. Some questions remain forever unanswered. Why did the Japanese choose December 14th? Why these men? What were their final thoughts as the gasoline ignited? Did they know, in those last moments, that 11 of their number would escape to tell the world what happened? What we know is documented in sworn testimony, military records, and the accounts of survivors. The 11 men who escaped ensured that the truth would be told. Their testimony saved thousands of other POWs who might have met similar fates. Today, the airstrip they built serves as the Antonio Bautista Air Base, an important anchor of the U.S.-Philippines alliance. The men who died building it are not forgotten. Daniel Crowley, who escaped the massacre by being transferred months earlier, lived to the age of 98. He spent his final years ensuring that the men who died would be remembered. The Japanese proved their threat of massacre was not an empty threat, Crowley said. They did proceed to murder about 150 Americans by burning them alive with gasoline. His words serve as both warning and memorial. The Palawan massacre reminds us of the depths of human cruelty and the heights of human courage. The 11 survivors who swam through shark-infested waters, hid in garbage dumps, evaded patrols, and lived to tell their story represent the indomitable spirit that no amount of brutality can extinguish. And Daniel Crowley, the man who survived Bataan, Corregidor, Palawan, the hell ships and the copper mines of Japan, reminds us that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can endure. Work or die, the guards told them. They worked, and some of them lived.